I want to share crochet love with everybody, you know? Hi there, my name's Amelia and I am the face behind Meema Makes, and I post crochet tutorials and general crafty content across the internet under the handle @Meema Makes. This is going to be the start of my podcast series. I've really enjoyed watching other people's craft podcasts and been watching a lot of their back catalogues of podcasts whilst I've been knitting the last week or two, and I just wanted to join in the podcast fun. I thought it would be a good way of you getting to know me a bit better and have a look at my projects, and I get to chat about crochet, and once I get going when I'm talking about crafts I don't stop, so I think I might enjoy making these quite a lot, but we'll see, I digress. So yeah, I live in Yorkshire with my partner and my cat Molly, who has been running around like a lunatic the last couple of hours, so she may or may not make an appearance because she's out at the minute. So yeah, she often appears in my content too because she is a proper cutie. So in these podcasts, I'm going to try and do them monthly. I think that's quite achievable for me, but we might have a few bonus episodes here and there. I'm going to run through what I'm up to, what projects I've finished, mainly crochet and knitting, but I also sew and do cross stitch and other crafty fun things. I often have a little dibble dabble in some other crafts as well, so you can join in with those adventures with me. So once I've gone through my current projects, my finished projects and my planned projects, at the end of this podcast I'm actually going to have a bit of a Q&A session, and I asked people on social media to ask me some questions that I can answer in this podcast, and I had some really good questions that I'm going to be able to talk about a lot. So if you fancy learning a bit more about crochet or my crochet journey and a bit more about me as well, then stick around to the end, and if you're a bit nosy, I think there's probably going to be some quite juicy stuff in there, so we will see when I get to filming it. So let's get started with all the crafty content. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I'm wearing. So I'm wearing this granny hexagon cardigan, which I made in January and February of this year, and I put up some TikTok tutorials for it, and they've now been compiled and uploaded to my YouTube. I am going to be refilming those tutorials because I know they're quite fast and not very beginner friendly. So I am going to be making another one of these jumpers very soon, but I will talk about that at the end. But yeah, so I really love this cardigan. I used 9.5 100-gram balls of James C. Brett Chunky with Merino, which I really like the double knitting with Merino that James C. Brett have, but I wasn't as keen on the chunky. It just seems to be like, I've worn it a couple of times and it's already starting to wear and get little bubbles on it, and I think I probably need to get one of those shavers to try and get some of the bubbles off. So yeah, I really love the jumper. Not sure about the yarn. The colour is amazing, but the yarn itself, I think I prefer my yarn a bit more tightly wound so they don't get those bubbles as much. I think it's called pilling, that, but I'm not sure. So yeah. And then the other thing I'm wearing is this cute headband, which leads us really well into the projects that I finished in March. Okay, so this headband is called the Simone Headband, and it is, I don't know if you can see there, but it's a cabled knit headband, and it's called, just looking at my Ravelry page, Simone by Emily Lewis, and it was actually a really fun knit. I held together a strand of hand-dyed high twist sock yarn from Hedgerow Yarns, who I really love her speckled yarns, and then I held it double with some Rialto lace, which is 100% merino lace weight yarn from Debbie Bliss that I got really cheap on the internet a few months ago. So yeah, so I held those double because it told me to hold a fingering weight and a lace weight yarn together, and then I knitted this, and it's kind of like a tube, so it's like double layered, and then it's got this cute little knot on the top. I kind of tucked the ends of the bow in because I felt a little bit weird with the bow hanging off like I was like 3 years old or something. But yeah, I really love this. Like the speckles from the Hedgerow yarn you can see really well. It's like this soft pink colour with these like turquoisey teal and red speckles. It's so lovely. I really love that colourway, and I've actually used it in one of my whips as well that I will show you a bit later. So yeah, I really love this headband. I feel like it gives me like land girl vibes. Oh, I've got a bit of hair sticking out a bit. There we go. So yeah, I feel like it gives me land girl vibes and I really think it suits me. And I like that I'm having a really bad hair day today. So I thought that it would be good to just wear for the podcast so I haven't got to try and sort out the frizzy mess that is my hair at the minute. But yeah, I really love it and I want to make some more, but maybe not this pattern because this pattern's double layered, so it's quite thick. So I'm not going to want to wear it very soon as the weather warms up. So I'm going to try and find a pattern for like a thinner one that's just a single layer. And maybe in like a teal or a green colour I think would suit me quite well. But yeah, I kind of love it. So I'm going to make some more I think because it just means that I don't have to think too hard about my hair that day. So the main project that I finished in March that I haven't actually revealed on social media, I finished it about 2.5 weeks ago. And it's so big, I just don't know how I'm going to film it for a reel or a TikTok to reveal it. So yeah, I measured it, it's a blanket, I measured it, it's just under 6 feet square. It's 178 centimetres square. It is a monster and it is the biggest crochet blanket I've ever crocheted in my 12 years of crocheting. So I'm going to try and show you some of it and then I'm going to put up some footage of the whole thing once I actually get around to taking the footage. So yeah, so this is, let me lean back a little bit. You can't even see all of it. So this is my sampler blanket. It's so big and heavy, like it's so big, but yeah, just try and hold it up again. So I get a lot of questions about this on social media. Can you put up tutorials? Oh, I really love that square, can you make a tutorial for it? All of the patterns aren't mine. I used other people's patterns, so I can't make tutorials for it. So yeah, so each square, so there's 49 squares. And I used 12 colours for the squares and then a 13th colour, the grey, for the join and the border. So some of the patterns are from this book, which is 200 Crochet Blocks by Jan Eaton. And there's lots, and let me just hold it up and you can see there's loads of square patterns in here. But I think I used 4 or 5 from that book and then the rest were just free patterns for Afghan blocks on Ravelry, and I will link in the description all the patterns and yarn and things that I'm talking about in the description. So on my Ravelry project page I've listed all of the different patterns that I used for this blanket. So there's 49 of them. The list of links is really, really long, but I think they're all free apart from the ones that I used from that book. And no, they weren't, the patterns were all different sizes and I had to make some smaller and make some bigger to make them all the same size. Each square across, so if we look at this brown one here, so each square across is, I think it's either 20 or 21 centimetres, and then I did 33 stitches along one side. So I am going to film how to design yourself a sampler blanket, because there are loads of different patterns for different crochet squares out there and they're really fun. I really enjoyed making it. I felt like the blanket squares themselves kind of made themselves because they felt like starting a new project. Oh, my mouth's getting a little bit dry. Let's have some more peppermint tea. So each square felt like a new project. I've got the blanket laid across my lap now. I wrapped myself up in it yesterday and sat in the garden and knitted some socks. And it is such a nice blanket to be under because of how weighty it is. So, right, let me just have a little sip of my drink and then I'll get back to talking about it. And Molly, can you stop scratching the door? Thank you. Molly, stop scratching the door. She's shoved her favourite toy under the open door and is now scratching at it trying to get it out. So she's on one today. I don't know what's up with her. She's an energetic cat anyway, but it's like extra energy today. Right, anyways, I'm just gonna have a quick break, have my tea, and then I'll get back to talking about this blanket. Right, I have a lot to say about this blanket, so I feel like what I was saying before was a bit muddled, so let's start again. So, patterns. I used some from the book and some that were free on Ravelry. You can find a list of links down below. I really love them all. I'm going to make some more blankets about it, showing maybe my top 10 squares and how I adjusted the patterns to make them the same size. And I've already filmed the joining method, so let me just show you. So it's a join as you go method. I'm trying to show you it really well there. So it's a join as you go method that I came up with myself, and I have filmed a tutorial for it, and I'm hoping it will go out this week as well. So yeah, and then like I said, I'll do some more videos about it, like talking about some of the square patterns and how I change the patterns. And then the border, I came up with myself as well, but it's curling. It's curling in, and I think it needs blocking, but how do I block a 6 foot wide blanket? I don't know what to do. The only thing I think of is it needs washing anyway, and it's made out of mostly Stylecraft Special and Hayfield Bonus acrylic DK yarns. So it should wash in the machine and the tumble dryer fine. So I'm tempted to wash it in the machine, if I can fit it in the machine even, because it's so heavy, and then put it in the tumbler for a short time, and then I'll have to get Liam to help me, because like I don't have the energy or the strength for this, but put some towels on the bed and then lay the blanket out and smooth the borders out while it finishes drying. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know. I saw someone blocking something with a hairdryer, and I feel like that could work too. I don't know, but anyway. So yeah, so the yarn that I used a mixture of Stylecraft Special Double Knit and Hayfield Bonus, and then one of the colours is James C. Brett. Oh, little petal poked in. Oh, and another one. There we go. So yeah, so that colour there, this greeny colour, that is sea green in James C. Brett double knitting with merino. And so most of the colours I've got 4 or 5 squares out of, but that one I've only got 3 because I used my stash and I didn't want to buy a whole nother ball just for 1 or 2 squares. So yeah, that one's only got 3 of it. And then the colour that I used to join is warm grey in Stylecraft Special Double Knit. So I feel like it's the biggest blanket I've ever made. It is my current favourite project because it's amazing. Like, I can't believe that I made this. I made all of these different squares. It was so much fun. Each square felt like a new project. I was doing like 1 a day for most of January, and it was so much fun. Would really recommend a project like this. I got to try out loads of different designers, and yeah, generally love it. So that is the big finish. This took me a long time to make. It took me 8 days of hours of crocheting every day to join all the squares. So it is pretty much what I finished in March. I didn't really get anything else finished because this is such a giant project. Yeah, and then this is what I did in the tutorial. So I'm hoping that I'll get the tutorial out this coming weekend, but it all depends on what else is going on. So yeah, so that is the little sample that I did with the join for the tutorial. Right, my last finished object for March is another headband. Yeah, I know. But this one, after I blocked it, is too big for me now. But yeah, so it's in Malabrigo sock. I don't know what colourway. And I kind of did that sewing thing that a lot of people do to get that like knot there. But yeah, so it's in Tunisian crochet. So it's my first Tunisian crochet project. I learned from TL Yarn Crafts, which is called Tony Lipsy on YouTube, and she does a lot of like modern Tunisian crochet designs, and they're so beautiful, and she uses a lot of hand-dyed yarns, and like I binged her content while I was making this, and it was, yeah. So I did actually really enjoy the Tunisian crochet. I tried it years ago and hated it, but apparently I was using too small size hook. You have to go up a couple of hook sizes. So that's what I did, and it actually turned out well. I blocked it, and now it's slightly too big for me, so it falls off, but I can't be bothered to unpick it all and like take a few rows out. So I'm just using it at the minute to hold my hair out of my face while I wash my face. So yeah, and then this will lead into my work in progress, my whips, because the next whip I'm going to show you is another Tunisian crochet project. The first whip that I started in March is in one of these bags. So my sister got me a set of these bags, project bags, for Christmas because I asked her for some project bags, and she went above and beyond, and she actually, that one's got a spelling mistake, so I won't show you that one. Ooh. I'll show you this one that hasn't got anything in it. So she got, each of them have got this little metal plaque stuck to it, and you can see it's engraved with Meema Makes, and then each one has a different saying. So this one says I practiced stitchcraft, and then what's this one say? This one says stitches be slipping, and each one has like a different crochet related saying on them. So they were really thoughtful gifts. She always does thoughtful gifts, does my sister. So yeah, so we'll get to the project that's actually in the bag. There's a spelling mistake on this one, so I'm not going to show you that one because I know she was a bit mortified about the spelling mistakes. Okay, so in this bag we've got my second Tunisian crochet project, and it's actually my first Tunisian crochet design, and it's going to be, if I can get this bloody zip open, so it's going to be, I'll just show it to you first. So it is a triangular Tunisian crochet shawl in 5 different hand-dyed yarns from 5 different sellers. Oh, actually, I think one of them's like a commercial dyed sock yarn, Malabrigo sock. So yeah, so this is what I've done, and this up here. So this colour is a shade of Koigu Painter's Palette Premium, and then I transitioned it into this pale pink colour, which is the same as the one in my headband. You can see it's the same. And then I've just started, so what I'm doing is I'm using 5 different colours, and I'm doing a section where I fade between the 2 different colours. So I've just started the 3rd colour, which is, I did post this on my social media, and I actually ended up ripping it back and changing it. So this is a little bit different to what you've seen if you've seen this shawl on like Instagram or somewhere. So this is a beautiful hand-dyed colourway. I don't know if you can see it. Hand-dyed colourway from Lonely Mountain Yarns in Northern Ireland. It's so pretty. It's got like reds and oranges and pinks and little flecks of green and blue, and I love it so much. So yeah, so that's the next colour that's going to go. So you can see it's gone from like more pale washed out colours down to like more pinks, and then it's going to get darker. So it's going to be that one next. And then I've got this pinky colour that's more of a semi-solid than like a speckled or a hand-painted yarn. So it's kind of like this corally pink colour. It looks a bit more orangey on the screen to what it is in real life. So it's from Henny Penny Makes. And then the final colour is going to be some more of that Malabrigo sock, the same that I used for the headband, for like the very edge of the triangle. So yeah, so I came up with this pattern myself. I don't know if the increase that I did, I should actually look up how you're supposed to do an increase in Tunisian simple stitch, because I did not look up how to do an increase before I did it. I just sort of did it, which is kind of what I do with crochet. I don't really follow many patterns in crochet unless I'm doing something like the sampler blanket. But for example, this, I could have followed a pattern for this, but I didn't. I just made it up myself because that's what I like doing with crochet. Knitting, I follow patterns like almost to the T, but crochet I just make up as I go along. So yeah, and I'll just show you. That is the dyer that I got the flower pot colourway from, that one. So yeah, so I am going to do a Tunisian crochet beginner tutorial, because I designed the shawl intending it to be the perfect first pattern for people who are new to Tunisian crochet, because it's straight Tunisian simple stitch with an increase at one side to make that triangular shape, and then there's some sections where you change colour every other row, like every row, so that you get that fade between 2 colour palettes. So that will be a future tutorial and potentially a free pattern as well. Yeah, so that's kind of exciting that I've learnt a new craft, and I was a crochet beginner for a bit. Like I learned to crochet 12.5 years ago, so it's been a long time since I learnt anything new in crochet. So it's been really amazing learning that. It's a little bit addictive as well. Okay, so next project is another crochet project, and it is the start of a crochet blanket. So on March 18th, I started a crochet along on the Meema Makes Crochet Club Facebook group that I will link down below if you want to come and share your crochet creations with us and join in crochet alongs or ask me any questions. I'm quite active in that Facebook group, and it's probably the best way to contact me because I get a bit overwhelmed with comments and messages on my other social media platforms, and the Meema Makes Crochet Club group is quite small at the minute. So if you've got a question about my patterns or any general crochet questions, just drop them in that group because I reply to most posts in that group. So yeah, so this blanket that I'm actually laid on the chair behind me is a giant granny square blanket in autumn colourways that I made in November last year. And in the group we voted that was going to be our first crochet along. So that's what started on the 18th of March. But I obviously don't want to make this blanket again because I already made it a few months ago. So instead, I also put up, if you do want to learn how to make this blanket, I've put up free tutorials for complete beginners, for beginners who have never crocheted a granny square before but know how to crochet. There's a tutorial for you, and there's a left-handed tutorial as well for this, for making a giant granny square blanket or any sized granny square. I sort of give you the formula of how to make a granny square. I also put up a tutorial for granny stripes because that was the blanket I was started. So I did start this 2 and a bit weeks ago using a lot of my acrylic double knit stash. I want to stop using 100% acrylic yarns because of their environmental impact, and I also prefer the feel of wool and cotton yarns over acrylic. So that's the goal moving forward. So what I thought is I will make one giant blanket out of all of my acrylic double knit stash and it'll all be gone and that'll be fine. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to have another go at doing a stripy blanket. I have a bit of a bad history with blankets that are stripes and not squares or hexagons. I have started so many ripple blankets and stripy blankets, and even blankets like the Spice of Life blanket by Sandra Cherryheart. I started that twice, and when I do a blanket that's in stripes, I just lose motivation on it. I think it's because it feels so much bigger than just doing one square at a time. So I thought I would try again with a granny stripe, and I did all of this in the first few days of the crochet along, and then I put it down and I haven't picked it up again. And I've only started making this recently, and I should be on the furious crocheting stage of making a blanket. I don't know about you, but when I make a blanket, when I start, I furiously crochet for a couple of weeks and get loads of it done, and then that slows down, and sometimes it gets put away for a year, 2, 3 more. I've got quite a lot of unfinished blankets, so yeah, it gets put away for a bit, and then I get the motivation to carry on, or sometimes I slowly do bits and bats here, and then I finish it. But that hasn't happened with this. I think it's just too boring for me. I think I like granny squares because you can play with the colours more, and I love how quick and easy they are. And this is granny stitch, but it's in stripes, and I'm just like using the same colour for really long rows, and I'm just not enjoying it. So I think I might frog it, which is bad because it's the one that I'm doing for the crochet along, but I just haven't got the motivation for it. I really don't have the motivation for it. So what I'm thinking of doing instead is I'll just put some footage on the screen now of my acrylic stash that I'm using for this blanket. There's some full balls and there's some partial balls and some scraps. So what I'm thinking of doing instead is another granny square blanket, but not a giant granny square blanket. What I'm thinking of doing is making some bigger granny squares and joining them together. So maybe like 12, 14 round granny squares and edging them in. I've got quite a lot of like pale grey and greyish colours that I might use as like the edge, the last round of each square, so that there's some sort of cohesion to it. And then join them all together, and then I can just sort of do it in bits and bats, and if I fancy making a granny square one day, I'll make a granny square. I'm working on my other projects. So that's what I'm thinking at the minute, but I haven't, honestly, if I wasn't doing the crochet along, I would have probably frogged it already. so I probably should just get out of the way and frog it, but I feel a bit bad that it's a crochet along blanket, but I'm not doing the actual crochet along blanket, I'm just doing the granny stripes. So yeah, so that's the story of this one. If you do want a tutorial for a granny stripes pattern, I have one. Any tutorials, any patterns, any yarn, I will link them in the description below if you need them. So yeah, would highly recommend checking out if there's anything in here, or if you can't find it, just leave me a comment and I will direct you to where you can find whatever yarn or pattern that I'm using is. So I've got two more work in progresses. So this is my only crochet work in progress at the minute, because I've been a bit sidetracked I've been in a knitting mood. I go through, so crochet I do consistently. Knitting, I have to be in the right mood, and I go through phases where I will knit for a few months, then I won't knit for a year. So I'm in a bit of a knitting phase at the minute, and I think it was triggered by me learning the Tunisian crochet. I was like, oh, actually, this is quite fun. I might try knitting again. So yeah, so that's what I've been doing. So we'll go through some knitting whips next. So the first one is in this one of these bags from my sister again, which I do like. They are a good size, but they're too small for blankets and they're too big for stuff like hats and headbands and socks. So I might need to make myself a big project bag for blanket projects and a small one for like socks, is what I'm thinking at the minute. But yeah, anyway, I digress. We're gonna have a look. So this is a knitted cardigan, and I started, oh, sorry, it's in bits and there's yarn everywhere. And so I started this cardigan. When did I start this cardigan? So I knitted my first cardigan in, it was either 2018 or 2019, and I've never actually worn it because it needs blocking. I really can't be bothered. People ask me about blocking all the time, and like, I block my knitting, I rarely block my crochet. I just can't be asked. And I do such big projects, I don't want to block a whole blanket, if I'm honest. So yeah, so I did, and then I started this just after, when was it? It was either 2018 or 2019 I started this cardigan. So yeah, I've got it all a bit joined at the minute. So this is, so I finished the body. So I don't know if you can see there, that's sort of the inside actually. So this is, there's an armhole, and this is the front. So you can see that lace pattern there. So this was my first cabled project. So I've knitted lace before. I went through a lace knitting stage in like 2016-ish. So, and this was my first cabled project. So this is the Acer Cardigan by Amy, let me just look at my notes. Amy Christophers. So yeah, and then that's the back of the cardigan. So yeah, so I've gone to have a look at the pattern and why I put it down. So I put it down not long after I started it, just as I had split the arm for the armholes, and my stitch count wasn't right. I remember my stitch count not being right, and I couldn't work out where it was, and I got so frustrated that I folded it all up and put it in a bag and forgot about it until a few weeks ago. I do that a lot with my projects, is they'll just go away for a few years and then I'll get them out and actually finish them. So yeah, but I worked out, I got it out. So me and my partner have had COVID again, and I wasn't feeling very well, and I was like, do you know what, I'm just going to get something out and see if I can actually work out what I'm going wrong, because I don't want to start another knitting pattern when this is hanging over my head, you know. So I got it out and I worked out what I'd done wrong. Is I'd missed a decrease when I was shaping the armholes. So the pattern says do this decrease and then do it 7 more times, and I think I must have read it as do this decrease 7 times, and I couldn't work out why my stitch count was wrong before, but I worked it out. I adjusted I didn't go back and fix it, I just adjusted the pattern. Yeah, and like this pattern is a nice pattern, it's just not very explainy, and I need quite explainy patterns when I'm knitting, because I feel like I'm good at crochet. Crochet clicks. Crochet is just my thing. I know what I'm doing, but knitting, I need direction. I need exact instructions. And she was like, just decrease 1 at the end of each row. And I'm like, but how do I do that when I'm doing all of these yarn over increases and cables and stuff? I just needed better instructions, I think. So yeah, so I did it. I fudged it, but it looks kind of okay. And obviously, like, it's not joined. And then I finished one sleeve with my nice stitch markers so I can work out where all my decreases are, because I just struggle with knitting. So yeah, I've done one shoulder. I feel like this armhole is massive though, compared to the hole it's got to go into. But yeah, so I've done one, and then I'm almost done the other one. I've just got to do the back and forth bits to shape the top of the sleeve. So I'm thinking, actually, if there are any knitters watching this, I do need some advice actually, because this is 100% acrylic yarn. It is it's from Hobbycraft. It's Women's Institute Soft and Smooth or something like that in light grey. I bought it years ago with a gift card I got for my birthday, and whenever I've blocked acrylic, it doesn't work. It doesn't hold the block. The only blocking I've done ever is spray blocking and wet blocking. And then I looked online and it said that for acrylic, you might be better off doing like a hairdryer or a steam blocking. But I'm a bit nervous to do that because apparently it semi-melts the fibres. And like, yeah, if anybody has any idea of how to blocking this really pretty cardigan, I'm thinking about just trying the hairdryer one and seeing, but I put so much work into this, and knitting is a chore for me sometimes. This felt like a chore, so I don't want to ruin it, you know. I have got that other cardigan that I don't really care about that's just sat in a suitcase under my bed for like 4 years, so I could get that out and try the hairdryer on that first and then see if I want to do it on that. I might do that actually. That could be a fun video. Like, that could be a fun YouTube video, couldn't it? I'm just going to use a hairdryer on my cardigan and let's see what happens. So yeah, I might do that. But so that's where I'm thinking with this cardigan. And I said before I want to move away from using 100% acrylic yarn. In fact, yarn that has more than sort of about 50% man-made fibres. Like, I understand the need for man-made fibres, right? Like nylon in socks, it's a given, you know, it makes them strong and last longer. But the environmental impact of acrylic yarns and microfibres and microplastics, I'm reducing the amount of plastic that I use in the rest of my life, so why not in my crafting? So yeah, I would never judge anyone. I'm not one of those judgy people like, oh my god, you're using man-made fibres, you're killing the world. No, I understand the need for it. It is cheap, it is widely available, and it comes in amazing colours. So I understand why people use acrylic. Acrylic is popular for crochet for a reason. Like, acrylic yarn for blankets is popular for a reason, because it's hard wearing. So I do understand the need for it. I just think personally I want to move away from using 100% acrylic, which I think makes sense. But yeah, you will never receive any judgment from me about your fibre content of your yarn. Like, I've seen it online and I'm just like, why are you arguing about this? It doesn't matter. So yeah. So that is my Acer cardigan. Just gonna have a bit of a tidy up and then I'll get the rest of my whips out. Oh, it's gone in there. I'll just chuck this. The wall's like gone halfway across the room, so I'll just tidy it all up afterwards. Okay, so we've got some more whips in this. So this is my sunflower patch bag. There is a pattern that is available on my Etsy and Ravelry shops. So this is my sunflower bag. I finished this in February. And then I've got some more whips in here. So, right. So this, first of all, I made this last year. It's 2 strands of sock yarn from Knit Global, which I think was a failed brand. Like, it never actually sold any. I got them like dirt cheap in Yarndale in 2016. So yeah, I held 2 strands of sock yarn together and it's got these pretty pooled bits. So yeah, and in here is, you can see it's all hanging out. That's just a needle, it's not even attached to it. Oh no, it is attached to something. Never mind. So yeah, so these are some socks. So if you saw my video, it was about 2 weeks ago, I think, where I went through I got all of my sock yarn out. I went through them all, I organised them with my lace weight yarn, and it was a long video. It was like 40 minutes or something of me just sorting yarn out and chatting about yarn and projects and working out what yarn to use. So yeah, so in that you might have seen that I bought some Lord of the Rings themed yarn from Lonely Mountain Yarns again, and I bought the sock set that is Gandalf, You Shall Not Pass. Look at the little quote, it's so cute. And I am a fantasy nerd. I read before I got ill, I used to read big fantasy novels a lot. And I love Lord of the Rings. I like the books I've read, but the films are just, I watch them at least once a year. The extended versions, of course. So yeah. So Gandalf, so I got a Gandalf sock set and it's inspired by Gandalf and I just wanted to knit some socks. And I've knitted socks before in double knit and Aran, but I have never knit socks in sock weight yarn before. So I thought this will give me good motivation to get them done. So I will just show you. So it's inspired by Gandalf the Grey. So the grey yarn is lots of, let me just hold that towards the camera a bit. So it's like almost like a semi-solid tonal, but with more variation between like a really pale grey and a really dark charcoal grey with, I don't know if you can see, there's like flecks of blue in it too. And then there was a little 20-gram skein with it. And that's what I've done for the toe and the heel. So I've only ever knit socks before. I've done cuff down and toe up in double knit and Aran, but I've only ever done the heel flap and gusset, and that fits my feet really well. But for this one, I'd seen a lot online about an afterthought heel and I was like, oh, that looks fun. It looks like the toe. So I put the heel in yesterday and I really don't like it. I really hated doing the afterthought heel. It was really fiddly to start with and the decreases, mine just weren't even. I think because I've never knitted anything this small, so it's on 2.5mm needles, I had never, I just think that my gauge just wasn't what I was expecting. I couldn't maintain my gauge very well. It was a bit all over the place. So my heels ended up being slightly tighter than the rest of the sock. And I bought 9-inch circulars as well because I was fed up. When I first started, I had to rip it back because it had a ladder in it where I'd like for the magic, because I usually knit magic loop. So yeah, I ended up knitting on 9-inch circulars in the end and I just didn't enjoy it. So I don't think I'll do an afterthought heel again. I really, really love doing heel flaps and gussets. They're really satisfying. So I think if I do I want to knit more socks. I don't know how much motivation I'll have for it because it's taken me blooming forever to get to this point. It feels like it's only actually been a few days, but it's pretty much all I've done for the last 3 days because I've not felt very well. So yeah. That is my first pair of sock weight socks. I have put in the heel for the other one as well because I know with the afterthought heel you're supposed to knit the whole sock and then put the heel in, but I didn't. I wanted to see how it fitted. I wanted to check that it fitted all right and I had it in the right place. So I have done, where's the other one? The other one's on some longer needles. That's what was all floating around. So yeah, that's how far I've got with the other one, the heel's in. So yeah, so I feel like I'm probably going to finish them in the next couple of days. And I might start another pair of socks after and just have a pair of socks on the go all the time because I like the idea of having just a drawer full of handmade socks. So yeah, we'll see whether that actually materialises or not because I know what I'm like. Oh yeah. And then yeah, these are the yarns that came in the set. She's a really nice lady as well. I asked her on Instagram if she could consider doing a tree bid and an Eowyn themed set. And she said maybe, so felt like that was a little bit cheeky, but never mind. Right, so I think that is all of my knitting and crochet whips. And then I've got one more whip to show you that's not knitting or crochet, it's cross stitch. So, cross stitch. I learnt to cross stitch during first lockdown. I did a couple of small, they're called Dimension Gold Petite kits. So I've done 3 of them. And then last Christmas 2021, I started this, and it's basically I didn't do much crochet or knitting for the first 6 months, maybe 7 months of 2022, so last year. I just worked on this, which is massive. So this is a Lakeside Village cross stitch kit by Dimensions Gold, and it's so pretty. Like, you just look at that from afar and it doesn't even look like cross stitch. I think it's like 16 count fabric, so like 16 crosses per inch. So yeah, so I haven't actually worked on this in March. I'm just showing you like the sort of things that I usually make. And then in March, I actually started a smaller cross stitch project because my partner's got really into cross stitch recently, and I was like, oh, I fancy having a, I don't want to work on my big project, I'm a bit burnt out with it. So I cross stitched my mum a bookmark with a Buddha on it because she's into that stuff. So, and I did that for Christmas, so I thought, oh, I'd quite like a cross stitch bookmark actually. So I got it quite cheap. I bought this set. So it's the William Morris Strawberry Thief design as a cross stitch bookmark, which I thought was really pretty. So I started this in March because I often get like pain if I knit and crochet too much. This is good because it gives those crochet and knitting arm and wrist muscles a break. So that's how far I've got. That's it. That's just how far I've got, and it's gonna look, let me hold it up. So I've done like the bottom of it. There you go. So yeah, so that's the non, oh, I just dropped everything on the floor. So that's all of my works in progress. So next we can talk about projects that I've got planned, because I have lots of plans running around in my head. And I'm not going to talk about everything that I've got planned, but we'll go through some of it now. Let's start with, just because it's already out, we're going to start with embroidery. So I've done a little bit of embroidery before, but I've never actually finished a project. I just practiced some stitches. So what I did is, because my partner's got really into crafts as well, and he really likes the cross stitch and wants to try embroidery and things like that. He has tried crochet, but he wanted to learn to make amigurumi, so I taught him, and he just wasn't enjoying it as much. And then he saw me cross stitching and wanted to try, so he tried it and he's like, no, this is it, this is a craft for me. So cross stitch is his thing. So we were talking about embroidery, and it's something I've wanted to do for a while. So I got us a shared 6-month subscription to the Love Embroidery magazine because it came free with some DMC threads and this gorgeous embroidery book. I mean, look at that, that is embroidery. Isn't it insane? So I want to work up and practice towards doing, I'll just find the one I want to do. Because like there's literally, it's so, some of the designs in here, this woman is so talented, but like some of the designs are just insane. Like, yeah, so that's the one I want to do actually. I want to do the sunflower. Sunflower is one of my favourite flowers, as you could probably have told from that sunflower bag. So I really want to do this one. It's absolutely beautiful. I love it so much. But I don't feel confident that I want it to be my first embroidery project because it's big and looks complicated. So I'm going to do some smaller ones first. And the latest issue of that magazine came with, if I can rummage in my bag to find it, came with this kit, like an Easter bunny, which I think I'm going to do. I'm probably not going to use the purple and the yellow and the green. I might do some colours that are a bit more me and make it more personalised, you know? So yeah, that is, I want to do this in April because I want to start having some embroidery on the go so that I can work myself up to doing that sunflower. So that's one thing that I'm wanting to do. I've also got, my mum got me this like years ago, I've also got a needle felt cactus kit that I might have a go at some point, but I don't know whether I'll actually get to that. But that's just in the same bag of like my future projects bag, you know? So some other future projects that I want to start in April. Let me double check my list so that, because I've changed my mind since I first wrote this podcast. Like, I didn't write the podcast, I wrote a bullet point of everything I wanted to talk about, and it's changed since I first wrote it. Oh, that's my cat coming in, so she might make an appearance now. Okay, so I've left it quite open because I'm thinking about doing those granny square blankets, and there's a lot of tutorials that I've got planned for April. I didn't want to put too much on my must start list. So I've chosen one crochet project and one knitting project that I want to start in April. So we'll start with crochet, I think, because it's this little lovely pile behind me. So it is Yarnsmith's Create Chunky, which is from woolwarehouse.co.uk. It is their own brand of acrylic yarn. And I know I said I want to stop using 100% acrylic yarn, but I kind of wanted to just try this so that I know what to recommend to people, because people ask me all the time what is a good cheap yarn for me to start crocheting with. So I thought, well, it's another brand of acrylic that I've not tried before, I'd like to try it. And actually I was umming and ahhing about buying some myself, and then Wool Warehouse actually reached out and offered to gift me some. So I've got some super chunky for a knitting tutorial that I am planning for some beginner knitters, because I know I've got quite a few people on my Instagram who are crocheters who want to learn to knit. So I'm gonna do a knitting tutorial. I know the knitting basics really well, but anything complicated like colour work or cables, I am not the person to ask. So, or even shaping like increases and decreases, I only just about know. So yeah, I'm not, but I can do a knitting tutorial, a basic knitting tutorial basically. So yeah, so then I've got obviously this Yarnsmith's Create in Chunky. So the other one was super chunky, so this is chunky, and I got it in 2 shades of blue, a shade of grey and a shade of pink, and I did get white as well, but I'm not actually going to use that for this project. So what I'm going to use this for is another one of these cardigans. So yeah, I'm going to do a stripy one rather than a solid colour one in this blue, pink and grey colour palette that I chose, because I really love dark blue and dusty pale pink together. I just think they're such a lovely, beautiful combination, and I'd really love a cardigan in those colours. So when they reached out and said, oh, we'll send you some, I was like, yes, okay, let's make a cardigan. So that's what I'm going to do with it, and I'm really excited. I'm going to improve the pattern as well. If you've seen any of those tutorials, I don't do a ribbed cuff, it's just like double crochet. And this edge is double crochet as well, and as I'm wearing it, it's curling and stretching. So what I would like to do, and I've had some feedback saying that my increases at the back of the neck weren't fitting and working well for some people. Their cardigans were like out here. So what I need to do is I need to properly sit down and actually design this cardigan. People have asked me for written pattern for it as well as refilming the tutorials. So that is kind of my goal for April, is to get a written pattern into testing and the tutorial up on YouTube for the whole cardigan. So I want to try and make the whole cardigan in April. It is in chunky yarn, so that is achievable. I just don't know whether I'll actually get it all done or not. So we will see, so keep your eye out for that. And then in terms of knitting, so I don't actually have any yarn or anything to show you for the knitting project, is Nicole from Common Thread Fibre. She's quite a new designer. She's only got one current design out at the minute, which is a shawl called the Golden Hall Shawl that is inspired by Rohan, Lord of the Rings. Can you notice a theme with what I'm into at the minute? I really want to do some fantasy knits and crochets. So, and she has got out she's got a pattern out for a shawl, but this coming weekend she's releasing her pattern that's called the Hat for Thorin. And if you've seen or read The Hobbit, Thorin is the dwarf in it. So, and it's this beautiful cabled hat, and I wanted another cable project because I really enjoyed the cables in this headband. So I really enjoyed the cables in it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to knit a cabled hat for Thorin, but for myself. Hers are in green and grey, and it's in sport. I commented and asked her what weight yarn I should get for it, because I kind of want to start it as soon as the pattern's out, you know. And she said she's using sport. So the only sport yarn I've got, well, I say the only yarn I've got a big box full of Debbie Bliss baby cash merino that I got cheap about 10 years ago. So that's what I'm thinking of using. The problem is the colours that I've got left are bright, almost like a Cath Kidston style palette, so not very Lord of the Ringsy, but I have got some dark blue and some ruby red, and I think either of those colours would look amazing in a cabled hat. So that's what I'm thinking. So that's the knitting project. I might change my mind about the knitting and the crochet, because I've got you know, I've got other things around that I could have shown you that are like, there's a granny square patchwork cardigan that my sister wants that I've made all the squares for, and I need to join them and do the like cuffs and things and write up the pattern. And there's also, I've got a half-made blanket made of daisies with a hexagon in, or like a solid colour hexagon around it, that was going to be a pattern as well. So I need to actually do one of those 3 things that I've started that will become a pattern. So yeah, I just have a lot of ideas and I want to get them all out into the world, and I have limited energy because of my health problems, so it's really hard to work out what I can do when I can do it. So yeah, so that's all of my chat about crochet, knitting stuff. I'm going to have a break now, and then I will come back and we will film that Q&A session, and we'll see how open I'm feeling about my life when I answer these questions. So I am so cross with myself. I bought myself a fancy microphone for when I do filming, because I film on my phone and I don't think the inbuilt microphone's very good, and I've obviously unplugged it at some point whilst filming that podcast, and the sound in the rest of the podcast is I'm really quiet. So I'm really sorry that I did that, but I really don't want to go back and refilm it just for the microphone. So yeah, I apologise for the audio quality of the rest of the podcast. I've now plugged my fancy microphone into my phone, so the Q&A should actually have some good quality audio for you. So yeah, I apologise, and I will try and not do that again, but I probably will at some point because I'm quite ditzy sometimes. So yeah. Right, so let me just get my laptop, because all of the questions that you've asked me I've put on it. So let's just have a look. So yeah, so I had a few questions from a few different people on Instagram and TikTok. What's the best thing for someone to make as their first crochet project? What are some beginner-friendly crochet projects that have practical everyday uses? What are the easiest projects to do, and how to start crocheting as a beginner? So I am passionate about introducing people to crochet and making it more accessible to beginners and people with disabilities and things like that. I want to make crochet an accessible hobby for people. So that's one of the reasons why I make the beginner-friendly tutorials. So in terms of what is a good beginner crochet project, I think it depends on your crochet goals. If you are learning to crochet because you want to make toys, you want to make amigurumi toys, make amigurumi toys as your first project. Find a simple one that's maybe spherical, like a piece of fruit or a round cactus or something like that, and start with that. If you want to make crochet clothes particularly, maybe start with an accessory like a hat. I actually have a tutorial on my TikTok for a beginner's hat, and there's also a free pattern. I'll put a picture of the hat here because I don't know where it is. It's probably upstairs in a box because it's too warm to wear hats this time of year now. And then if you really love granny squares and you want to make blankets and homewares, start with a granny square. This giant granny square blanket, I've got tutorials for complete beginners. So if you've never picked up a crochet hook in your life, so that's usually my advice that I give to people when I ask. And then Lily on Insta asked beginner-friendly crochet products that are practical and have everyday uses. Again, I think it depends on what your crochet goals are when you are learning to crochet. So of what is practical, I think something really practical like a bag to hold all your yarn and your crochet in is probably a really good place to start. So maybe try a granny square bag, and then you can use that bag to hold your yarn and your projects moving forward. So that's probably the most practical thing I can think of that is a great beginner project, is literally just a tote bag with some granny squares and a strip of crochet for some handles. That will teach you quite a lot of skills, but also be really approachable and helpful thing to have. So here, now we're going to get into some juicier questions. I say juicier, they're just more about me than about crochet in general, you know? So I have quite a few questions that were on a similar vein, so I'll try and answer them all at the same time. So Reborn Love 3 on Insta asks, when did you start to love crocheting? Honestly, I loved crochet before I started it. I had a hard time with my mental health when I was 19. I was taking some time out of university and I was knitting, and I went online to look for some free patterns and I discovered crochet, and I was just like looking at all of these granny square blankets and granny straw. It was about the time that Attic24, who, if you didn't know, is quite a long-standing famous person in the crochet community. She makes simple beginner-friendly blanket patterns for free, and she puts like colour palettes of yarn together. And I started crocheting when she was making her now famous Granny Stripes blanket. So yeah, I saw her blanket, and her blanket wasn't exactly my sort of colours, but I went with her. I found another blanket that was like a 3-round granny square with 2 rounds of white around it, all joined, and I was like, that is beautiful. I want to make that. I love crochet. I want to make that. So I ordered some yarn off the internet. I ordered Stylecraft Special on Attic24's advice. Well, not advice, but like she had posted that it was a good yarn for blankets. So I bought some. I didn't even think about what colours were going together, if I'm honest. I just like, I'll just order that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And actually they came together, and I ordered a lot of cream to go around it. And if any of you have ever used Stylecraft Special double knit in cream, it's quite a yellow colour. And I had some like bright pinks and blues that were like Disney princess colours, and it didn't. I don't think it looked very nice when I'd finished the blanket, but I was unbelievable. I still have it. I don't use it anymore, but I was unbelievably proud of that blanket. I made it in about 2.5 weeks. I was so proud of myself. And that was when I loved crochet. I never looked back. It has been my primary hobby since then. I've always had crochet projects on the go since then. I've never not had a crochet project around me somewhere, which is how I've ended up. Until this point, I've mainly made blankets. So that's how I've ended up with so many crochet blankets. And I have gifted some. Don't get me wrong, I have gifted some. But when I put years of my life into a project, I can't gift it or sell it. It's just it means too much to me, you know? So yeah, that's when I started loving crocheting. So rainbow.ladybird on Instagram asked, how did you get to where you are now in your crochet journey? And Jodie on Facebook asked, how did you decide to make a career from crocheting? So I've always had crochet around ever since I learnt when I was 19. I've always had a project on the go, and I've slowly built up my skills over the years, learning all the different stitches and doing lots of blankets. And I think I've always been part of the online craft community. I've had it in my Ravelry account says I joined in 2012, but I'm sure I had an account in like 2010, so I must have had 2 accounts at some point. So I've been around in the online craft community for a while. I tried starting a blog when I was about 21 because I wanted to share some patterns and stuff that I'd come up with, but I only made a couple of posts and then life got in the way. And I've had this stuff, I've always had like projects and stuff going on, and then my life's just been really busy. So it's been hard to think, right, I'm going to sit down and write up that crochet pattern that I've been thinking about for 5 years, you know? And then I then trained to be a midwife, and my time was even less. I had even less time during my degree and when I was then a qualified midwife. But I always had bits and bobs on the go, you know. I always had a project around me. I was always cross-stitching or maybe knitting, or my hair's coming out of my headband a bit. I don't want you all to see how bad my hair is. So I've always had projects on the go. And then this is where it gets a bit juicy. So in August 2021, I caught COVID. I don't think it was the first time, I think it was the second time. And I didn't end up in hospital or anything, but I felt like I had like a bad flu. That's how it felt. I was unwell for a few weeks. I think I did too much too quickly while I was recovering from COVID, and now I have long COVID. I got really down about this, and then I moved in with my partner in September because he was going to start doing some caring, like some stuff for me, like caring, like making sure I'm eating, because I wasn't eating very well and things like that. So he cooks some things for me now because I don't have the energy, or I have a lot of pain, and I have some health problems that have been caused by the long COVID. And yeah, so I'm better than I was. I am slowly recovering. I don't know if I'll ever get back to the level of health that I had before I caught COVID, but I don't think I will. But so how this relates to crochet is that when I moved in with my partner, I finally had the energy and the brain space to start crocheting and knitting and doing things more often and getting my brain organised, my project organised, and I had all of these half finished blankets I was really motivated to finish. If you've followed me the last 6 months, I finished like 5 blankets. It's mad. So yeah, and then I started posting on Instagram, and I'd had an Instagram account in like 2017, but I'd only made like maybe 10 posts, something like that, and stopped posting. So I revived my Instagram, and then I started posting on TikTok. And then someone on TikTok asked me for a tutorial, and I was like, oh, I'll have a go at that. And I started making tutorials on TikTok and general, I'm going to share my craft content. And it kind of, over Christmas in January, exploded. I hit 10,000 followers on TikTok on Christmas Day. As of today, I have 178,000 followers on TikTok, which is insane. That 178,000 people have looked at my account and my content and thought, yeah, I'm going to follow her. I want to see some more. Like, that's just insane to me. And yeah, I've fallen out of love a bit with TikTok. I'll maybe talk about that a bit later. But yeah, so that happened. And then I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. I can flexibly work. Well, not necessarily work, but when I'm feeling okay, I'm having a better day, I can sit and write patterns, I can film videos, I can film tutorials, because I use a wheelchair when I go out because of how unwell I am. But if I'm sat at home in my own space, I can. If I'm having a bad day, I don't do anything. I don't even crochet, I just lay in bed. So on a good day, I can write these patterns and put them out there, and maybe I can, earn a little bit of money coming back in, but that wasn't what was important to me. What was important is that I had a purpose again. I went from being a person who was a qualified midwife, I was working for the community of the town that I live in, and I was helping people and helping families at the start of their life. And then I was doing a master's degree in public health, and I was going to go on and I was going to change the state of the healthcare services, and I had all these big goals and ambitions, and then long COVID kind of brought all that crashing down. And then I did try a few years ago like I said, I had a blog when I was about 21, and I put up a couple of posts and then I stopped. And it's always been in the back of my mind, like, I would really love to share my crochet patterns with the world. I want to share crochet love with everybody, and that's always, and now I have the time. I don't necessarily have the energy to do it, but I do have the time. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am on my crochet journey, basically. It was a very long-winded story, so I'm sorry. But yeah, let's have a look at the next question. Right. Next question. So Jodie on Facebook, who asked me about how did I decide to make a career from crocheting. And then her second part of the question, did I ever feel like giving up? Well, yeah, because I actually did give up when I was like 21, 22. Like, I did this vlog and I had all these intentions and I gave up. So yeah, I've already given up before and now I've come back to it. But I've come back to it with fresh eyes, I think. I think I really enjoy filming a lot more than I thought it would. And when it was back when I learned when I was like 2010, 2011, everyone was mad about blogs. It was all about crochet blogs and people would put up blog posts every week of what they were doing. And now it's all about the Instagram, the photo, and the specifically video content. And I enjoy that a lot more than I did when I tried writing blog posts, because it's so hard to get your personality across and to communicate with a written word, So yeah, I did nearly give up. And then I had a wobble a couple of weeks ago. I had a really bad day on TikTok. I've had some issues with copyright. I've had people cropping my name out of my videos and reposting them with no credit to me at all that I've needed to report. I had 3 reports to do in a day. And I also had several, I don't know why, but TikTok, I get some rude comments on TikTok sometimes. Nothing overt like, oh my God, you're horrible. Nothing like that. But like, I'll just get, oh, your hands are shaking. I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay. Did you like the tutorial though, mate? I don't know. And then sometimes I just get a word like, sometimes the only comment they leave is just like pattern. Or I've had a couple of times where they've not even said tutorial, they've just said tute. They've just put TUT, that's their comment. I'm like, why am I won't reply to you like that. Like, I get some really lovely comments, but if you like my content and you can't even be bothered to write a sentence or a question, all you write is a a partial word, like, why would I go through the effort of answering you then? Because I have thousands of comments every week that I try and get to. And yeah, so I was getting so fed up with TikTok that I nearly deleted it. And I thought, right, I'm going to sleep on it because it's my biggest following. I'm going to sleep on it. And then I came back the next morning and I had some really lovely comments from people like, oh my God, I'm having a hard time and learning to crochet is really helping. Thank you so much for putting your tutorials out there. And comments like that are just like, yes, this is what I'm doing it for. And it kind of relit the fire a little bit. And I was like, right, so I'm posting less on TikTok and more on YouTube and Instagram at the minute because I'm still getting some comments about on TikTok that I just don't want to engage with it, you know? Okay, I'm fed up of complaining, so let's have a look at the next question. So, right, Mia on TikTok, who has followed me for a while, because I remember you, Mia. So yeah, so I hope I'm saying it right, it's not Maya. I'm hoping it's Mia, but yeah, Mia on TikTok. What are the best pieces that I have made? So, I would say the best piece that I've made is this sampler blanket. Like, I am so proud of it. 49 different patterns, and then I came up with the join and the border myself. I feel like it summarises my crochet journey. You know, like it has literally summarises my crochet journey. Like, there's all sorts of stitches in here that I've learned. Like, I mean, look at that one. For example, that's loads of popcorns and back post stitches. There's some clusters in that one. I just feel like this summarises my crochet journey. And yeah, so I would probably say this is the best thing I've ever made. The one that I'm really proud of is my Sophie's Universe blanket that I'll put here now. So that was a crochet along in like 2015, 2016 or so. I didn't actually finish the entire blanket. I stopped it a bit early because I was a bit fed up at that point, but I learned so much making that blanket as well. So I think it's probably this one and that blanket because they're the most complicated crochet things I've ever made. In terms of knitting, like, I've been getting back into knitting again. I don't understand how I managed to do all of the, I'll put some more pictures here. I did a bunch of lace knit shawls in like 2016, 2017. I wouldn't be able to do that now. I don't have the knitting skills anymore. I've lost those knitting skills and it's insane that I knitted that. Like, it's just insane. But anyway. So Mia had another question, which is the last question, I think, because my throat's getting a bit sore. So we'll answer one more question and then I know that a lot of people ask me some other questions and I will try and answer them in the next podcast. So Mia asked, other than crochet or knitting, do I like or have tried, not liked, want to try any other crafts? So I've talked a little bit about cross stitch and embroidery already. So what crafts have I tried that I didn't like? I did not like diamond painting. I bought a couple of kits and I did the smallest one. I didn't like it. I was getting really bad backache and I don't like the finished, it's just too sparkly. The finished piece is too sparkly. I prefer cross stitch. So yeah, diamond painting wasn't for me. I have some scrapbooking stuff and I went through a scrapbooking phase where I was scrapbooking my holidays. I never finished it and I'm a bit, because of my limitations now, I know that I can't go travelling by myself anymore. I used to go travelling by myself for a week or two every year and I can't do that anymore. So I can't bring myself to finish off the scrapbook of all of my travels. So yeah, so scrapbooking, not something I'm probably going to do anytime soon. Journaling, I didn't like either. I've never been able to keep up with a diary or anything, so I don't know why I thought journaling would be all right. I tried doing a reading journal because I used to be quite a big reader. But yeah, so and then stuff that I've tried and liked. So I have talked a little bit. Here we go. I'm here. Everything's like in a pile, really messy pile down here. So I'm going to talk about some things. So I have done some quilting before. So I made half of a quilt top years and years and years ago, and I have quite a lot of fabric with me intending to make quilts, and I just didn't have anywhere set up really where I was living before or since where I can set up my sewing machine and a big table for cutting and make a quilt. So last year, like October time, I started making this quilt, and it's actually, so I've made 25 6-inch blocks, and these are all, you can see from the seams on the back, these are hand sewn. It's called, so the technique is called hand piecing, and I hand pieced these quilt blocks with these little bits of fabric. And I went for like an autumnal theme with some like reproduction prints from like 1800s. Like, look at that one, that one's so pretty. So yeah, so I want to hand stitch myself a quilt. I stopped making these regularly because I got into the mode where I'm going to finish all of my crochet blankets. So I did put these down, but I have got 25. Look at that little stack there that I made between September and like November last year. So it is a lot of fun. I like it. I just need more time for it because they take quite a long time to cut the pieces and do the templates and then stitch them together. So yeah, this is a long-term project. I am going to make this quilt, and if it's something you want to do too, it is from this book, which is the Farmer's Wife Sampler Quilt by, who's it by? Laurie Aaron Hurd, and she's an American, so I know quilting's really popular in America, so it's actually, each of the blocks are inspired by some letters that 1920s farm wives sent to a farm magazine. They asked if they would be happy if their daughter married a farmer. So there's a lot of stuff in here about living with nature and things like that, and there's literally, I'll just bring up a page. It has the block and then a little excerpt from the letter from this 1920s house, a 1920s farmer's wife. So it's amazing. And there's also, she's put out another book of this as well that's 1930s squares as well, but I'm sticking to the 1920s one. I've had it for a long time. I wanted to do it for a long time. So yeah, and I am actually halfway through block 26, but I put this down in November and never picked it up. So yeah, that's the sort of size of the pieces that I'm making, which is insane. So yeah, quilting is something that I think I will get on really well with. So I'd love to make some handmade quilts by machine and hand sewn. So that one is, I don't know how big it's going to get. I'm just going to keep making blocks until I get bored. And then yeah, so that's on the go. And then the other thing is sewing again. So I've been thinking about, I've made a lot of crochet blankets in the past, and I'm sure I will always have crochet blankets on my hook, but I want to do some handmade clothes. Whether that is crochet, knitting or sewing, I want to make myself some clothes. So that's what I'm planning to do in the future. I think I tried to make a skirt in like 2014 and it didn't go very well. And I'm a big girl, so it takes a lot of fabric to cover me. So it's not going to be cheap, but I would just really love to make myself some clothes. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave the rest of the questions to answer in the next. I think I've missed 2 and I'll answer in the next podcast. So yeah, if you have any questions you want to ask me, crochet, knitting, life, books, film, whatever you fancy, pop them in the comments and I will answer them in the next podcast. So I'm going to try and do this podcast at the beginning of every month and maybe with some bonus episodes in between. So yeah, I hope you all have a brilliant week, and if you're a crocheter, happy hooking. If you really enjoyed this video, I recommend the video that's on the screen now, where I go through all of my sock and lace weight yarn and have a chat about my future projects.